This week on Tech News Weekly, we're going to take a look at that big debacle that happened in Iowa with our Democratic voting. Also, what's going on with Nvidia and more gaming for everyone all over the cloud. And yes, since I'm on here, we're going to talk about some cameras too. Check it out. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. You're focused on security, but are your employees? LastPass can ensure that they are by making access and authentication seamless. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 119, recorded Thursday, February 6th, 2020. Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is the show where we talk to people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Jason Howell.
And I am Aunt Pruitt.
Sitting in for Micah Sargent, and it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for plopping down.
I appreciate you having me here. It's always an honor and a thrill to be on the Tech News Weekly set, but I think this is my first time being on the set with you, though.
Yeah, first time with me. Been on a couple of times with Micah. This is not your first rodeo.
This is going to be fun.
And I've never been to a rodeo, so there you go. All right, top news. Monday night was expected to be huge. The Iowa caucuses in the U.S. Would be the earliest indication of who might lead the Democratic race heading into the 2020 presidential election. But things basically went about as badly as could be conceived because of the failure of a smartphone app, of all things. And joining us to talk about the app, who's behind it, and what it means possibly for the Democratic Party in this election is Kevin Robillard, senior political reporter for the Huffington Post. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Great to be on.
It's great to have you here. So you wrote pretty early on in this whole story as it developed about the app itself when all of this chaos was still relatively fresh. Talk a little bit about what you learned, first about Acronym, and then, of course, how that relates to Shadow Inc.
Yeah. So Acronym's a group that a lot of people who report on Democratic politics and a lot of people involved in Democratic politics have obviously been following for quite a while. It's sort of a nonprofit digital consulting firm. It does a lot of things. It does Facebook ads. It works with different state parties and with different state candidates on their digital programs. It's a fairly standard digital consulting firm in many ways, except for it's been set up as a nonprofit, which made it a little bit different in a whole bunch of ways. And it's also just been getting quite a bit of buzz. Tara McGowan is the founder. She's received a lot of attention. Acronym's work has been written up in Bloomberg and in other places. One profile called her the most dangerous Democratic operative you've ever heard of. So there really was quite a bit of buzz behind Acronym. And I think part of the reason that buzz is part of the reason why once this went down, it was very quickly people very quickly pointed the finger at them. So Acronym owns a company called Shadow. It's an interesting setup. Acronym is a nonprofit, but Shadow is a for-profit company that is wholly owned by Acronym. So basically any profit Shadow makes sort of then used to sort of fund, for the most part, more ads supporting Democratic candidates or supporting voter registration, things like that. And so Shadow, which they bought earlier this year, wasn't nearly as well known. Acronym, at least in Democratic Party circles, has been very well known for about a few years now. And so quickly people sort of did the paper trail to figure out that it looked like Shadow had made this app. For a long time, the Iowa Democratic Party had refused to say who made the app, sort of citing cybersecurity reasons. But people basically, by looking at the Iowa Democratic Party and seeing that they had paid Shadow $60,000 for website development, people sort of quickly figured out that that actually meant for developing this app.
All right. So, and I mean, this app, you know, when we say it failed, I mean, it failed pretty spectacularly.
Yes.
And right at about the most critical point, I think, you know, at least for the Democratic Party, they're hoping that at the very beginning of this very official movement towards, you know, where we're heading with the election at the end of this year, like this is a big signal point for how this year is going to play out. And yet this app failed so hard. Was there any indication as far as kind of any scrutiny, any security testing or a process testing that this app was put through ahead of time? Have there been any comments on that? Like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't know it was going to screw up this hard because we did this. What have you heard on that front?
So for the most part, both Shadow and Acronym have been fairly quiet about this, except to sort of try to debunk some of the conspiracy theories that have popped up around this. But there really hasn't been much indication of the testing that it went through. We know that it wasn't even available on the App Store, which that caused a bit of confusion. A lot of the people who run these Caucus sites, particularly in places in rural Iowa, are quite old. They're not technologically savvy in a lot of cases, and they were struggling even to figure out how to get the app onto their phone.
Oh, man.
So it doesn't look like this app really had a big lead-up time or was subjected to a lot of testing. The Department of Homeland Security said they offered to sort of test the cybersecurity of the app beforehand, and that the Iowa Democratic Party declined.
Oh, so they declined the test, the security?
Apparently so.
That makes a ton of sense.
And one thing we should keep in mind there is the Department of Homeland Security, it's Trump, and this is the Democratic Party. So
okay.
Democrats, they don't think I've confirmed or deny that fact, but that's what the Department of Homeland Security has told several reporters.
But there is definitely a level of curiosity there, and something that could potentially be pointed to. Now, how has this shaped up as far as true fault behind all of this? Is it specifically related to this app? Are there other elements at play? Because, I mean, the app really came under scrutiny and a lot of questioning as far as this is concerned. But there have been changes also behind the scenes that, or at least ahead of this election, as far as electronic voting, that might also have something to do with kind of the chaos that happened, right?
Yeah, and there's been changes. There were changes to the caucus rules since 2016.
That's it. Yeah.
And that was part of the reason why this app was even needed. There were always going to be differences because basically in the past, caucuses can be quite complicated. For those who don't know, you sort of everybody basically goes into, it's usually something like a high school gym. And then you sort of stand in the corner of the candidate you support. And then if your candidate doesn't have enough support to be viable, which in Iowa, that means they have to have 15% support of everyone who's there, you sort of realign. So it needed to track all of these realignments and then ultimately also track how many delegates were being awarded from each caucus site. So the app was doing more than just sort of uploading the results instantaneously. It was also supposed to help each candidate was getting from each one of these caucus sites. So there was a lot going on there. And I think we can definitely blame this also somewhat on the state party for perhaps not training these people well enough. And just look, some of these leaders got confused and didn't know what to do. But it also appears that for a lot of the people, even the people who did figure everything out, the app just wasn't working.
Yeah.
Now, is there a bit of a lesson learned here as far as what's the next step far as our democratic process and having electrical devices involved and apps and whatnot involved in our democratic process? What is the next step? Has there been any discussion from other groups beyond the folks at Acronym that's talking about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a bit of a movement even before this for really to go back to let's make sure there's always a paper ballot, at least as a backup.
Right.
Paper ballots.
They had paper backups this time, right?
Yeah, they had paper ballots. So I think there's already been that movement. I think this is going to end up within the political space. This is really going to hurt any push towards using apps, towards using electronic methods of tallying votes more, just because of how poorly this went and how high profile of a screw up this was. So I think you're going to encounter more resistance among Democrats to using this, and I think probably among some Republicans too. When it's interesting, in 2016, both the Iowa Republicans and Iowa Democrats used an app designed by Microsoft that worked perfectly fine by all accounts. And in this year, the Iowa Republican caucuses obviously weren't very dramatic. Donald Trump was always going to win them, and he did win them by a huge margin. But they also used an app to report the results, and there were no problems with using that app that anyone has heard of.
And Microsoft a little bit more known to create solid quality apps and systems than a company that we hadn't really heard of until it failed miserably.
Even though I can't seem to find my webcam right now. Thank you, Microsoft.
Well, yeah, okay, not perfect, but webcam problem, a little bit of a different story than the democratic process. And then other state caucuses, like are there other states that were expecting to rely on this app as well? And if so, ago, who, and what are their plans now?
Yeah, so the one state that really looked like they were going to do it is Nevada. So one thing to know is that generally caucuses have sort of fallen out of favor in recent years. It used to be that many more states had them. After 2016 in particular, a lot of states moved away from them. And so one key difference there is that caucuses are usually run by the state party. So the Iowa Democratic Party ran the Iowa caucuses.
Right.
Usually if you hold the primaries, those are usually run by the state itself. And very few states have adopted things like this. They're using basically the same voting systems that they would use in the general election. Some rely more heavily on technology. Some are almost entirely paper-based. Here in New Hampshire, for instance, it's very heavily reliant on paper ballots that are then sort of tallied by usually town clerks in New Hampshire, sort of tally the votes up. But Nevada was the one state that had also paid shadow for website development. They've never quite come out and said, the Nevada Democratic Party, that they were planning on using this app, but they've made it very clear that if they were ever planning on using it, they're definitely not planning on using it now. So it doesn't look like any other states will be using this particular app. It's not clear exactly what the Nevada Democratic Party will be doing, if they have a backup app in place or if they're just going to be going entirely to paper ballots. That's not quite clear yet.
We've had the fact of the matter is we've had a lot of practice with paper ballots. We have not had a lot of practice with electronic ballots. There will, of course, be hiccups along the way. That's what we're experiencing. It doesn't make it any less painful, and it also kind of feels unnecessary considering we had and have had a system that has worked so robustly for a very, very long time. Kevin Robillard from Huffington Post, HuffPost.com, of course. Where can people follow you online if they want to find your specific work?
Follow me on Twitter at Robillard, just my last name, at Robillard. Follow me on Twitter. I tweet all the time.
Right on, Kevin. Thank you so much for taking time for us today. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Right.
Now, before we get to our next interview, which is purely focused on Fujifilm's new X100V camera system, a topic that you, Ant, are intimately interested in, it makes sense for maybe you to tell everybody a little bit about hands-on photography. This is your show, and I think that ties in perfectly with the next story.
Oh, yes. Hands-on photography, a show that we affectionately call HOP here at twit.tv. This is a show where we sit down each Thursday afternoon and just go through some tips and tricks to help make you a better photographer, as well as go through some post-processing tips and tricks. You know, last week we talked about some selective adjustments that are and how that differs from global adjustments. So a lot of little nuanced things that can make your images pop. And again, we also talk about just basic composition, just going to make you even better with whatever camera you have. I don't care if it's a gazillion-dollar camera or if it's just your old El Cheapo Android phone. Whatever it takes, we're going to have you out there creating and dominating.
Nice. That's fantastic. So twit.tv/HOP /hop. And if you do that, you might, you're going to get exposed to some material that's similar to this next story. Who knows? Maybe someday you'll get this camera system. You'll be able to play around with.
Maybe one of these days you have that in your kit there. So now before we went on air, I made a promise to say, hey, I'm not going to talk about cameras or photography this week on Tech News Weekly. I tried my best not to make that happen.
You can talk about it if you want to. That's the beauty of the show. You book what you want.
So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk about photography. I'm going to have our guest talk about photography. Mr. Bryan Minear, professional photographer, graphic artist, also a Fujifilm ambassador, is joining us this week to talk about the latest camera that was just dropped on us from the folks at Fujifilm. It's the X100V. Beautiful compact system camera. Mr. Minear, how you doing, my man?
I'm great, Ant. How are you today?
Unbelievable as always. It's really good to see you, and I appreciate you hopping in and joining us this week on the show.
Nice to meet you, Bryan.
And
you too, man. Honored to be here.
Perfect. So I know that you are a Fujifilm ambassador, so that means you got your hands on some goodies way before everybody else did, and you had to keep it a secret.
I wouldn't say way.
So you had to keep it a little bit of a secret.
Sometimes it's sooner than others.
And spend a little bit of time with it. And I saw that you put up some beautiful images and wrote a little bit of a blog about what's been going on with this new device. Tell us a little bit about the X100V.
Yeah, so I got it about 2 weeks ago, actually, a little over 2 weeks ago now. But with the, future knowing that it's going to be released like 2 weeks. So it's like content. What do I just want to get my hands on this camera. Like, I'm not a sales guy. I know there's a lot of kind of stigma to being an ambassador where it's like, well, you're just shoving products down my throat. But I always try to take the approach of, look, there's so many people that want to get their hands on these cameras, like maybe somebody that's looking about their first purchase or upgrading. I want to take it out, use it, get to know the features. That way I can be kind of like a conduit for them to see what the camera can do and what it's capable of. So that's kind of my approach to it. I'm not pushing this on anybody. I just want to, take this little awesome camera, 5 generations ago, the camera that got me into the system to begin with, and, put it to work and see what it can do.
That's a beautiful shot that's up on the screen right now.
And that's something that I've always enjoyed about you is I've been following you for a while here on Twitter and on Instagram, and you don't pull any punches. If you like something about it, you will mention it, and if you don't, you will mention that as well. So you've been pretty straightforward and fair on both fronts for that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and here's something that's interesting, like as ambassadors, a lot of times we'll get these cameras and we don't even get communicated the full information about feature set. Right. We just have to dive in and figure it out for ourselves. So even, I sat down and wrote my that blog post that you just shared. I wrote that on Monday. The announcement was Tuesday. So I didn't even know Monday if the camera was weather sealed or not. You know what I mean? Like leading into it, I had no idea. And then I watched the live preview that Fujifilm did, the Fujifilm Summit from London, where they talked about adding the addition, because of the moving element in the lens, adding a filter on the end actually does weather seal the camera, which was a huge, big ask from photographers. That's what they wanted in this system. So it was really awesome, but I had to go back into my blog and then, add this little tidbit about it. Yeah.
Now with this camera, let's look at it from someone that's just going to a merchant to buy their first camera, if you will. What's going to separate the X100V versus going out to buy, say, a Canon point and shoot? Is it the same type of body? Is it the same specs that we're going to look at, different sensors? Are we going to have lens attachments or anything like that? Yep.
So I think the biggest separating point between this and a lot of the other cameras in this form factor is the sensor size. So if you look at, I'm blanking on names right now. There's a Panasonic that's branded Leica, and I forget the model of the camera, but it's got like a 1-inch sensor, a much smaller sensor. So while they're comparable in feature sets and maybe around price point, they're really not comparable when you take the sensor size into account. Now, your average everyday consumer isn't really going to think about those things. They're going to be looking at price, megapixels, but the beauty of this little thing is it's a pocketable little camera that has fully manual controls. You can shoot in RAW. It's got all of the amazing film simulation modes that Fujifilm's known for. So it's got everything that a pro like me loves in a camera system that I can use, out in the field, but it's also just easy and it's small. You can get attachments for the lenses there's a wide adapter that makes it a 28 millimeter equivalent, and then there's a telephoto adapter that makes it a 50 millimeter equivalent. So there are some different adapters that you can get into, but I think the real beauty with this camera is just, it is what it is. You get one focal length and that's what you got.
All right. So that's the difference. This is a single lens. This is only attached to the body. It's nothing that you can remove. This is not a DSLR or anything like that.
Nothing that you can attach on top of the lens as well.
Just the attachment, like he was mentioning, as far as having something to give you a little extra length with your focal length.
If you want to, but it's not. Yeah, I've used them, but I've never needed them for myself. I like the simplicity. Sometimes it's nice to just go out and not have do I change lenses here? Do I put what do I use? It's just a lot easier when you're stuck, and it kind of forces you to think a little more creatively, I think.
Yeah, right. I could absolutely see that. I years ago bought my wife a mirrored SLR camera, a DSLR camera. You can tell that I'm not as fluent in the camera speak as you both are. But I did that because she really wanted to take some really great pictures. She's like, I really wanted to, we had just had our daughter, and she really wanted to take some nice artistic shots that were better than what she could get on her phone. And I mean, that thing's been used a handful of times because it's so big and beastly and understand all of the kind of the different attachments that you can use on it if you know exactly what you're doing.
Right.
This is more my speed because it kind of locks you in. You know what you get out of it. It's pocketable enough. It looks, I mean, relatively compact.
Everything I've seen about it looks like it would fit in a jeans pocket and be perfect for something like street photography. Just in the little knobs on it, it has this sort of novelty feel to it.
It totally,
you know,
yeah, a little bit of a retro quality.
It's totally cool to see it. You know.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love, and I mean this camera, but all of the Fujifilm cameras really are the dials. Like you can see in that photo you're showing right now, there's an aperture ring on the lens. You have a shutter speed dial. You have an ISO dial right underneath the shutter speed dial. You pull up actually on the shutter speed dial, it locks in place, and then you can twist around and change your ISO. So like if you're a photographer that has an understanding of the exposure triangle, you don't even have to dig in a menu to change anything. It's all right there in front of you. You know, when I first started on Instagram, just little tidbit, I was using my phone maybe 50% of the time for the stuff that I was sharing. And as I kind of gradually got more accustomed to my editing style and kind of grew that, like my artistic vision, I kind of outgrew the phone and outgrew it from a quality standpoint. And the X100, at the time it was the X100T, kind of took place of my phone because they're roughly the same size. Like I had a 7 Plus maybe or something like that. So outline wise, it's the same kind of footprint. Obviously the camera's thicker,
right?
But that kind of replaced that phone single lens thing for me. But with the quality, obviously, you get much better quality.
And that body it seems to be the gateway drug, if you will, for the Fujifilm product line. I've always heard the X100T is what people got started on and is what hooked them to where they wanted to keep staying in and buying into whatever else Fujifilm had out there.
There's a Fujifilm manager, and his name escapes me right now. Obviously, he's Japanese, but he always says that he deals. It's like when he's selling cameras, he feels like he's dealing crack because he just gets people hooked on into this system, and then you can't help but just be addicted to it.
Right, right. Now, one more question. Actually, two more questions. Price point with this particular body and its availability, and who exactly is this camera marketed towards?
Sure. So price point, it's $13.99. Availability, I think the silver will be available end of February, and I believe the black will be available into March. I believe by end of March. I think that's it. Like I said, I'm not a sales guy, but that sounds right. So yeah, I think honestly this camera is marketed toward somebody who may be looking to switch systems. Maybe they've been interested in like something about the Fujifilm system, but not sure where to start. I think the beauty of this camera is you don't have to, get a body and then have to decide what lenses you want and kind of a path forward. And what I always tell people when switching systems, like, don't do it unless you have a real reason to. But if you are switching, it's much better if you do it slowly and gradually. Obviously, it's not always like an affordable option to like pick up a camera and see where it fits in your workflow and then build from there. But that's how I did it. I shot Canon for a long time, got the original X100 body and then the X Pro one, and kind of went from there and realized that these cameras could take place of my Canon cameras. And so it happened over the course of like a few years, me transitioning. Right. But then also I think this camera is also for someone who may be in like a DSLR body and hates carrying around a ton of gear, and they just want something really small, simple, capable that kind of gets them back to the passion of photography, because that's the whole point. That was my whole point in getting into the Fuji system, was getting a camera that was going to get me away from these like work cameras that I could then just kind of like do personal work and have fun with. And so the Fuji system became fun to me, and then that kind of progressed, and I've been with it ever since.
I feel like as you were talking, I was like, yeah, that sounds like me.
His hands
like
went
when
up.
I think about photography and stuff like that, because that's what really kind of drew me away from the DSLR that we do have is just the bulk of it. I'm so used to always having a camera in my pocket, which means like now I want a pocketable camera.
Right.
But I would love to make a step up from my Pixel, which I do feel takes pretty great pictures in and of itself, but it's nothing to the tune of what I'm seeing in these pictures. There's just so much more flexibility and dynamic to the images.
The Pixel is a phone and a camera, but that camera is a camera, period. So you're going to get a whole lot of different performance levels there.
For sure. Now the price on this, it looks like around $1,400. So and that's I wouldn't say that that's really outside of the ballpark of someone who wants to take the step up from a casual camera experience into something that has a lot of power.
And it's going to last for a long time. Yeah. You won't need to upgrade that for quite a while because it's at 26 megapixels as well, right?
Yep, 26.1 megapixels. The sensor's backside illuminated. So it is the same sensor that is in the flagship XT3 and the X Pro 3. It's definitely around for a while. It's weather sealed. And I was having a conversation on Twitter with somebody last night that was asking, like, just what does weather sealed mean? And I have shot with these cameras in downpours and snow, ice, sand, in the desert, and I have not had an issue with weather sealing. Wow. So they're definitely in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of your Instagram stories out in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing but there's tons and tons of white stuff all over the ground. I think y'all call it snow where you're from.
We live in California.
We got a dusting last night.
A dusting, and it's probably 2 feet.
4 inches.
Now, Mr. Minear, I really do appreciate you hopping in. Where can we find you online, and whether it's your social medias, your website, and some of the work that you're doing, because I know you're all into graphic design as well as photography and just helping people out. You do a really good job of helping people out and answering questions that are just, hey, should I buy this or why should I buy this, and so on and so forth.
Yep, I'm a matchmaker. That's what I call myself. You can find me anywhere at Bryan Minear. I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram for posting, Twitter for chatting and answering questions and stuff like that, but also bryanminear.com. And yeah, that's me. I'm always down to chat gear. No question's a stupid question. And, except for what settings did you use to shoot that? That's kind of a stupid
don't ask that
because
question.
The light changes all the time and settings change all the time. But anyway, no.
Yeah, that's right. Well, my man, thank you so much. I'm sure I'll be in touch with you soon just to chat you up a little bit. It's good talking to you,
Sounds great, man. Awesome. Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
Thank you, Bryan.
We'll care.
Talk to you soon. All right, Google captured the gaming world's attention late last year. You may remember this with a limited release of Stadia for cloud gaming. I think that limited release is going to become a wide release here pretty soon. Mixed reviews on that, myself included, I will admit. And now Nvidia is finally opening the doors to the public for its own cloud gaming service called GeForce Now. You've probably heard of it because it's been in the works for a very long time in different iterations and all that. Joining us to talk about how this differs from Stadia and what's on offer really is Sean Hollister from The Verge. Welcome back, Sean.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. It's been a little while. So you wrote about this, so you would know. Well, first of all, how much experience and time did you have with Stadia, and were you impressed with it at all?
I did the review of Stadia for The Verge, and I am exceptionally impressed by cloud gaming in general, and I like Stadia in particular because it drove kind of a new quality bar for this idea. I've always wanted to be able to take my games anywhere, and while we're not quite there yet because 5G networks aren't quite there yet, this idea that I don't need a console to play the games, I can just have a little dongle on my TV or an old crappy laptop or even my phone playing AAA games, it's something I've been testing out since 2010, I would say, back when OnLive and Gaikai were doing this thing. Oh, yes. NVIDIA's been working on this nearly as long. So when Stadia came in here and threw a lot of legitimacy behind the idea, Google saying, cloud gaming's going to be a thing, we're going to do it, we're going to put our huge infrastructure toward that, I was really excited. The reality is that they have good technology, but they don't have all the games that we thought they might have and all of the unique features that might make cloud games more interesting than regular games aren't there yet. So it's kind of a limited selection right now where you're paying for a glorified beta. And what really frustrates me about Stadia is that you're paying 3 ways to get into this beta. You have to pay $130 to get your hardware. You'll have to start paying $10 a month for their service, which allows you to play these games over the cloud. And you also have to buy the games on top of that. They don't just give you more than a few of the games at a time in their $10 a month subscription. So generally, you're buying your big games on top of that as well. GeForce Now, totally different proposition. They say not only can you try this thing for free right now for an hour at a time, which is something that Stadia will eventually let you do for free as well, but they haven't said when, but you can pay just $5 a month to basically bring all of your a vast collection of your existing PC games, whether you bought them on Steam, whether you bought them on Epic, whether you bought them on Ubisoft's Uplay, or the Epic's or Blizzard's Battle.net. Those are the four major ones that they support. Whether you bought them in any of these platforms, you can now take those things and you can bring them to your phone. Here is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which I think the brightness is a little too much. Let me turn that down so my camera can actually show you a little bit of that. But this is the samurai hack and slash game. Very difficult game that I love quite a bit. Running here on effectively a Pixel phone with GeForce Now. And this is not running from my computer. This is running over the cloud from servers in probably San Jose, California, is where their closest servers to me are. And so I can run around in this game, and there's not a terrible amount of lag. I will not be able to play this competently looking at a reflection of the screen.
Come on,
it's not an ideal
you can do it
scenario.
Can I really? Okay. It's also kind of a dark game. Okay, we'll move on from that. But they've been invested in this technology for a very long time, starting with the Nvidia Shield portable here, which is Nvidia was going to have their own portable game system back in 2012, 2013. They were building this thing, and in 2013, they back when they announced this thing originally, it was you can play games on this Android handheld device that are on Android. You can additionally play games that are streaming from your own computer on your local network. That's kind of cool. But in the whole while, they were working on these cloud-based GPUs so that you can stream them over the cloud. And they actually helped Gaikai back in 2012 or so with their servers. They helped other companies like Ubitus with their cloud gaming servers as well. And now it's just now, NVIDIA is saying, we think there's an opportunity for us to do this ourselves. And the nice thing about that, I know I'm not letting you ask a lot of questions. The nice thing about that is because they don't have a brand of their own, a particular gaming brand of their own to push. They're just the middleman between all these different publishers. It's kind of bringing a lot of games together from other publishers. The other publishers are probably more willing to work with them than they would be necessarily when they're talking when Sony comes by and Microsoft comes by and says we want this thing to be exclusive. When Google comes by, has to build a game platform from scratch and get these publishers to chime in and bring their games to the platform. NVIDIA can say, well, your games already run on our GPUs. You can keep the relationship with your consumers. You get all the money because they're buying them, through Steam. They're buying them through, Uplay already. It's the existing relationships. Just let us put them on this additional platform where we can make gaming more accessible. I think that's a better pitch than some of the other pitches.
One thing that sticks out for me is that Stadia might be not as ideal for people who already have, like you said, have a game library. So maybe Stadia is the solution for someone who doesn't already have a console and who's thinking of dipping their toes into the console world and maybe want a less expensive way to do it, right? 1080p streaming is free. All they have to do is buy the game and they have a system to play it. Whereas the NVIDIA GeForce Now's approach might be better fit for already gamers, for people who have already built up a library and want that library to be portable. Would you say that's a fair kind of assumption?
I don't actually know if that's true.
Okay.
When the free tier for Stadia comes out, and all we know about that is that Google's Phil Harrison has said it's sometime in the next few months, whatever few months mean, we will be at a point where both NVIDIA and Google will say, you can try our thing for free. All you have to do is buy the game. Mm-hmm. And in NVIDIA's case, if you're buying that game from Steam, you're buying that game from Uplay, you're buying that game from Epic Game Store or Blizzard. In Google's case, you're buying that game from Google. But either way, the proposition is pay $60 for your game, play it for free with us at 1080p in the cloud. There's not that much difference there. The difference is that Google has to negotiate all those relationships mostly from scratch. I mean, they have executives there from Sony and from Microsoft helping them negotiate that have jumped ship to Google to make them do this. So there's a relationships there. But both of these platforms will be offering something fairly comparable. It's just that they have to negotiate the relationship. They have to port them to Linux to get them on Stadia, whereas they already run on GeForce now. Mm-hmm. It's mostly about the licensing deals. In the future, theoretically, Google could be a much more interesting platform because not only do they have that value proposition, but they're asking developers to build games for the cloud with features that are unique to the cloud, games that could not exist before. Because instead of having basically the equivalent of a single computer that would be under your desk now being in the cloud instead, Google can say, well, actually, let's let this game use 4 of our servers at once. Let's let this game give you a real-time stream, a video stream of what all of your teammates are doing in the game, which is something they've already rolled out with Ghost Recon Breakpoint and are bringing to more features in the future. What if your gameplay sessions could be natively streamed to YouTube within our infrastructure at high frame rate, high resolution? These are things that Google is promising will come. And Google itself is putting some of its money into its own studios to build games that are only possible in the cloud. They're not promising those games will be here anytime soon, but that's something they say that they're doing. I have never in the what is this? About a decade covering this technology, I have never met any game publisher willing to tell me that they are building games exclusively for the cloud.
Now, Mr. Hollister, when this Stadia came out, I was totally confused because I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to have to pay $10 a month, buy the game, and I'm going to get 4K streaming, and it's just going to be an amazing experience. But as Mr. Howell said earlier, we had it here in the studio, and boy, it did not look good. It was so choppy, and I'm thinking, there's no value in this. So you're telling me Google is saying, hey, we're going to fix this. It's going to be worth your $10 a month plus your $60 for the game, and we're going to bring even more to the table?
You bring up a wonderful point, and that is that the quality of networks in the United States varies ridiculously widely. Mm-hmm. And people, I would say by and large, do not understand the various things that go into this, the various reasons why cloud gaming may or may not work for them, and some of the fixes that need to be made to make that work. A lot of the stuff is not on Google's end. It is our existing infrastructure is not capable, and so I think it's helpful to think about the various parts of the internet that are required to make cloud gaming work. Most people understand the download speeds that they get from their internet service provider. Mm-hmm. Your 150 megabit per second cable connection is a lot faster than your 25 megabit per second, which is, I believe, the current definition of high speed broadband in the United States is below. Mm-hmm. 25 megabit per second is far below what the optimal download speed for cloud gaming is, but bandwidth is just one of the components. That bandwidth is the quality of the stream that we can, the image quality of the stream that we can give you at its best. So that's where your 4K comes in, perhaps, is download speed. But there's also latency. Latency depends on, one, how far you are away from the servers. I am fairly close in Union City, California, to the San Jose, California servers that Nvidia has. There's a lot of other companies, probably including Google, that have server farms in San Jose or nearby. I'm a pretty good case for this. There are some people in the country who are far enough away from a server that the time between them pressing a button on their controller and their character reacting on screen will simply never be good enough because they are physically located too far away. Yeah. Nvidia says they're covering 80% of the high-speed broadband population right now with their servers. That's 20% automatically that are not. Right. So
that's a lot of people.
There's 20% right there. There's also the ongoing quality of the connection to think about. Not only is it, so I'm close enough to the server. Let's say I'm close enough to the server. My download speeds are good enough. I should get it should be quick when I press the button for the time my character reacts on screen. The image quality looks good. Great. If that connection has any deviance in it, and whether that deviance be my wife is streaming something on her, on the TV downstairs, We're a household that's cut the cord. Maybe she's doing some Netflix, some Hulu, Disney Plus, something like that. Mm-hmm. She's streaming some 4K. All of a sudden, I might have not enough bandwidth, but also my latency might be impacted a little bit because my home router has to deal with different things going on. Mm-hmm. If my house is full of smart home gadgets that are all, taking up some time there, might do a thing. There's also the how many boxes are on your network separating you from your raw internet connection. In a scenario like your studio or like corporate offices of any kind, honestly, any kind of office building, it's very likely you will not be able to play cloud gaming on a corporate network because there are additional layers of infrastructure in there that reduce the response time, make that latency much higher, and create that lag. You got to think about all these various things. And so what's really important is that people get to just easily and simply try cloud gaming for free, see if it works for them, and not have to throw money at something that may not work for them as well as it could be. They just need to try it very easily. And I think we get to the point where, and this is what Google is promising in the future, this is something Gaikai was working on a decade ago, you get to the point where you don't need to install an app necessarily. You don't need to put down $130 for a starter kit. You don't even need to sign up for Nvidia service. You may get to the point where you will click on a link in a YouTube video. Your favorite YouTuber will say, hey, check out this game I'm trying right now. Here's a link. You press the link, and you're playing instantly. That's not that far away. No. We've seen demonstrations of that already. I have clicked on such links in the past and been dropped into a game in my web browser, just like that.
And Google has mentioned that as an upcoming feature on Stadia. That specifically is something that could happen. That sounds like a magical demonstration, right? To be browsing the web and instantly you're inside of a very powerful PC running a game that you didn't really have to spend anything on to get that preview. Right. That says something. If you had to at this stage, if you had to kind of pick a horse to bet on, it sounds like it might actually be Stadia, but what would you pick and why? Google has a lot going for it here. Google has a lot going for it here in the long term. What they're dealing with now is they need to satisfy the gaming community and early adopters that they intend to keep spending on this, that they are not going away, that they are in this for the long haul. And I think they need to do some kind of make good, and they need to do some kind of relaunch. And they have an obvious opportunity for a relaunch here, to reset the expectations around the platform, to lay out a clear roadmap for when things are various features are going to arrive, to when they can get to that. You click the YouTube link and play instantly. They have an obvious opportunity for this when they roll out the free tier of the service. So I imagine they are very hard at work right now figuring out how to message that properly, to not set the expectations too high in the short term, and be like, this is a 5-year journey for us, a 10-year journey for us, and here are the various points that you are going to be wowed along the way. No, they need to do that.
It seems like that free tier would be a good way to come after someone like me that is a fringe gamer. I'm a little bit better than playing Candy Crush, but I'm not necessarily a elite Call of Duty player. So does that sound about right? Just to get someone on the free tier and let them try it out, and maybe it'll hook me in.
Yeah, right.
And to your earlier point about this being for about cloud gaming services in general, maybe not GeForce Now versus Stadia, but cloud gaming services in general, being for folks who do not necessarily have a giant library of games yet, who I think in general, the more they make this feel like a console, except even easier because you don't need to buy the discs and you don't need to install patches and downloads and all that kind of stuff. The more they make this feel like a console, the simpler they make that proposition, the better, and it will pull people away from that console model, and it may even expand gaming to folks who would not currently pick up a console, even much less a gaming PC, because it can be that easy when done properly, assuming your connection is good enough, assuming you live close enough, all those kinds of things that you need to just try and see if it works.
Lots of assumptions.
Lots of assumptions, but when it's free,
why not?
And that's the entry point for both of these products, and kind of sounds like, especially at this stage of its development, even though this has been coming a long time, that free tier is essential because that ends up being kind of the taste that pulls people, like you were talking about, pulls people in. Suddenly, like what is the barrier when it's free? You can definitely check it out, and if you get something out of that, eventually, maybe you plan on springing for a little bit more and getting that higher quality, and you've got an ecosystem, that's building around it. So.
Right.
Sean, always great to get you on. I appreciate your time today. Sean Hollister writes for The Verge. Where can people follow you online if they want to see what you're up to?
Oh, me personally, that'll be Starfire2258 on Twitter.
I will always have you say it instead of me.
Wow.
You'll get it right, and I might get it wrong. Thank you so much for hopping on today. Great talking with you.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Alrighty.
Now, Mr. Howell.
Yes.
Seems like every time you and I are actually together on the mics, whether it's This Week in Google or All About Android, facial recognition and AI seems to come up.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well,
it's intriguing. That's why.
Intriguing? I don't know if I'm going to say that just yet. Well, again, facial recognition has been in the news. It's been some questionable information coming up from the folks at Clearview AI, and unfortunately, they had a nice little cease and desist letter come in the mail from them, to them from the folks at Google, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Now, I've been a proponent of AI, and I've been a proponent of facial recognition as long as you have it properly trained by people with a much broader vision and a broader scope, because I personally can't say that I would be able to just train it all on my own. I would need a group of people to help train this, because we all have different perspectives on how we see things. You know, so why not just have a group and a team of people from all different backgrounds and all different approaches and perspectives to train this AI? Now, with Clearview AI, the problem that they've run into is they're using their technology to help about 600 different law enforcement offices to figure out who's breaking the law, who's tearing up things in the neighborhood, if you will.
Okay.
And Google and Facebook and all of the big tech companies are saying, hey, we can't have you going out there scraping our public images and putting them into your database for law enforcement. We don't approve of that. Now, what are your thoughts on this? Because there has to be a need for facial recognition in law enforcement. Has to be. But then there's a fine line between morality. There's a fine line between giving the wrong people that much power. There's a fine line between it just being flat out bad tech.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I think I'm a little torn on it. Like you said, I think there are certain applications in law enforcement where facial recognition totally, ends up being the thing that solves the case. Let's say something happens, all you have is a face, and you can identify through that. And there's a legitimate use for facial recognition. Great. Like, that makes sense to me. It's a tool for law enforcement. I can also see the slippery slope perspective of something like that. Suddenly and that's what Clearview AI's CEO is saying, is like, people don't need to get concerned about this. This is not being used willy-nilly. It's specifically being used when law enforcement have a specific use for it. I think it's easy, though, to see how access to to tools like this could potentially be justified to extend beyond that. And then we start heading into, the tinfoil hat kind of, futuristic view of science fiction, so where everybody's people are identified prior to or whatever, or, maybe something isn't purely illegal, but doesn't align with a certain person's value, personal values, and suddenly they are able to justify the use of this to get a clear identification of this person or whatever. You can see the different directions that it could possibly go, and I don't think that this is. I think this has the potential of going there eventually, given a long enough timetable. Anyways, I don't think facial recognition in this regard is going anywhere. Right. Technology is going to continue progressing. I think it is telling, though, that these companies, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, like all of these companies that Clearview AI is scraping from, like, are they doing this themselves? It kind of seems like they've chosen not to. And maybe there's good reason for that. Yeah. But yet Clearview has built their kind of business around it. So who is Clearview?
Right.
And do they even have the right to do this? Because it's against the terms of service on these company sites in the first place. To scrape it.
Yeah, but at the same time, you hear people arguing, well, public is public. Public information is public information. Sure. And that's where we start splitting hairs on the morality side of things. This got my attention because back home in the Charlotte area, there was a recent incident at a particular convenience store where it was labeled as a flash mob, went into a convenience store and pretty much destroyed it.
That's not a flash mob.
Had a food fight, if you will. The attendee was injured. They threw something at the attendee and injured her. But no one knows who the people were. All they have to do is look at the surveillance footage inside of the store and try to see if they can recognize anybody in that footage so they can go out to make the arrests that they need to make, and that's when I'm thinking about facial recognition and AI coming in and speeding up that process, because those people need to be responsible for their actions, right. But then at the same time, pull up a facial recognition app on me and it labels me as a wrongdoer.
Right.
So,
right. Because what is the perspective or the experience or the people behind creating that tool in the first place?
Right.
Do we trust that they're doing it in a fair, equitable way? It's a complicated mess.
Slippery slope, but we need this stuff. AI can just continue to make things a lot better for us in our day-to-day lives. I've been a proponent for AI on the creative side when it comes to doing my photography and post-processing and things like that. But we can do more with this AI as long as we got the right people in place that sort of help train it and guide it up. And one of these days we'll figure all of this stuff out.
But I guess the definition, in defining who is the right person, is Clearview AI, are they the right people to be
maybe they are
and creating the technology around that?
Maybe they are with Google and Facebook and YouTube. Maybe they are as a group.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I totally agree, by the way. I think that the tools are powerful and have great application for something like a scenario like that. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, right? People were caught on video breaking the law. And
period.
So if
it's black and white
with that clear indication of breaking the law,
right?
It was nothing questionable. Obviously, doing something that is purely illegal.
Right.
Caught on video. There are already tools to identify people. Here's another tool that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. At the same time, and what is public is public. So that I agree with that too. But if Clearview AI is scraping sites like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and doing so against the terms of service on that platform, I would argue that those photos are public in one sense, but also property of those companies, and they kind of control that on another sense. So maybe Clearview AI's reason for existing is pure, but the way that they're going about kind of building up their database leaves a little to be desired. Maybe
that's fair.
What they should do is create a better relationship so that they're doing legitimately, so that maybe the users on those platforms know and understand that when they share a photo on that service,
right,
what might actually happen to them,
right?
Because we share a lot of things and we don't actually know what's going to happen to it, and at this point it feels kind of pointless and to even push back on it because everybody's doing whatever they want anyways.
But what gets me is a lot of those terms of services, I can't say I remember what the terms of services of Google are right off the top of my head, but a lot of them have a clause in there that says we will use this data however we see fit, even if it means to sell it to X company or that company for whatever marketing purposes that they may have. Maybe there's something already in there that Clearview, I'm getting the name screwed up. Maybe there's something in there that they already knew that could be a potential loophole. I don't know, but I'm sure this is not going to end right here with
of course not. Of course not.
I'm sorry for bringing the show down this week, guys.
No, dude. I mean, anyone who watches this show knows I love AI topics. Like, I'm purely fascinated by AI and its proliferation over the last couple of years.
Indeed.
So. I'm also fascinated with foldable phones. Okay. That's a little bit of a segue. I don't know how I did on that one. One of the most, thank you.
That was almost a dad joke.
One of the most eagerly awaited phones of 2020. It could turn out to be a really big joke, actually, based on the RAZR. Early 2020 anyways. This is the return of the Motorola RAZR phone. It officially releases to everyone today. So today is the date. If you've been waiting, I think you can go into the Verizon store and pick one up. Maybe you were able to get it a little bit earlier than that. Some people have been able to. But anyways, this time the throwback device features a modern foldable display because that's all the rage these days, apparently. So much positive press leading up to its release, but things change pretty quickly, as we know, in the technology space. Early hands-on reports are showing that people aren't very satisfied with what they're getting here. So it had a lot of really goodwill leading up to this. I think just because of the brand and the model, you know, it holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts.
What did you expect, people?
They wanted this to be a really great phone.
I just don't see how. This is a smaller form factor. Granted, there are people that say that, hey, we don't want these large, giant phones, but this is going a little bit too small, and it's going to be a little bit limiting, right, from a usability standpoint.
Well, I don't know. When it's unfolded, it's the size of a normal smartphone.
Yeah, I'm still not buying it.
And it's down into a little square in
I'm
your pocket.
Still not buying
like
it.
A candy bar size thing. Android Central had a little bit of like a 48 hours with the device, calls it a, quote, creaking disappointment. And that's because shortly after they got it, the folding mechanism just has a lot of like creaks and snaps in it when you use it, and not the like good snap. Like I would say the good snap is like when you shut it to close it, it snaps when it closes.
That's really satisfying. Hang up on them.
But like if you move the kind of hinge system slowly, you hear like little creaks and things like that, kind of clicky. They say it feels cheap, especially considering the price point. This phone is not inexpensive. It's a $1,500 phone.
No.
I can understand.
Not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Motorola did say in its press materials that bumps and lumps on the display are normal. So they're setting an expectation there. They're like, we know this has been the Achilles heel of foldables.
They couldn't even say that with a straight face. Come on.
Oh, but they tried. They did. They said it with a straight face. They don't know if anyone listened with a straight face. Apparently, there's video that you can find where the display itself, like when you fold it halfway closed, the display on the inside is not permanently attached to the phone, right? It kind of lifts off a little bit. That's so that it can fold without a crease. It allows it to do that. But what that essentially means is that you can use your finger to get underneath the display and like flick it up some stuff, and potentially like it's just a major point of ingress, a major point for dust, for particles, for curious fingers to accidentally peel it up and destroy it, like a teardown has shown.
I don't know.
Points of weakness.
I get the effort on that, trying to do something different. You know, I said the same thing when Samsung announced their foldable device. Kudos to Motorola for trying to do something different, because pretty much all smartphones look the same now.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
They're just a slate of glass with a plastic coating or aluminum at times. You know, but they're all the same. But kudos to them for trying to do something different. And also kudos to them because I can remember buying the RAZR phone for Queen Pruitt on Valentine's Day.
Oh.
And this is getting pretty close to it again this year.
It is.
So kudos to them for having it right around the same time.
You know, now on Queen Pruitt's phone, did it do the thing where the little vents on the side let in pocket lint and dust? Or I guess
I do not remember,
because I remember seeing a lot of those old Motorola RAZR phones, and the display just had this like layer of like lint and dust on the top of it, but on the other side, like it's like it got in between there.
I wouldn't doubt
between
it.
The glass and
I wouldn't doubt it, but I remember buying that phone and just sort of keeping it out of sight, out of mind, because if she was destroying it, I didn't want to be frustrated. So
yeah, so I mean, I think the big question mark here is how it's going to actually do, considering it's coming out literally less than a week before the announcement of Samsung's similarly foldable phone, which is the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip. This announcement happens next Tuesday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific. Leo and I are going to be here in the studio doing coverage of that event, the Samsung's Unpacked event, where we're going to see the Z Flip, which is actually less expensive than the Motorola RAZR phone by $100-ish, right around there, expected to be. And better specs. So Motorola RAZR phone kind of has decidedly mid-range internals.
Yeah.
And the Z Flip is expected to have one of the latest Snapdragon processors.
But hasn't the Motorola line historically been sort of mid-range?
That's true. That's a good point.
Up to maybe one or two models, but most of their devices were sort of mid-range on spec-wise.
Lately, that's true. However, from a pure price perspective, you're talking $1,500 for the inferior specs. $1,500 for a mid-range foldable versus $1,400 for a premium foldable.
Wrong.
And that just kind of at the same time.
That's just wrong.
That's kind of hard to justify, I think.
Or maybe this will go the way of the Pixel line and be discounted in about 2 months to half the price.
That very well might be the case. Yep, absolutely.
We shall see.
Anyway, so it sounds like you're not like all in on the foldable thing.
That would be no, sir.
Gonna stick with the Pixel.
Not at all. Well, I mean, again, you have too many barriers of entry for issues with foldable devices, in my opinion, because of that hinge. I'm not so concerned about the creaking sound of it. I'm just more concerned about what happens if a hinge just sort of wears out and it won't even close properly. Or breakage in general. Then you talk about the screen peeling up just ever so slightly.
I know that kind of weirds me
It's
out.
just too much. Give me that single piece of glass that we're all carrying around where I can put into a nice case and put some tempered glass on the top of it. Yes, my phone looks like everybody else's out there on the planet, but it's functional.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I hope that we can get one in-house sometime soon. If we do, I'm sure we're going to put it through the test.
And I won't ridicule you about it on air.
No, I'll let you use it. You can use it, and then you'll be like, wait a minute, I was wrong.
Right.
This is the best thing ever.
Right, says no one.
Are you on Verizon?
I am on Verizon.
Oh, okay, so see? It's kind of exclusive, so okay, all right. There's no winning you over on this, I understand. All right, and that is the show for the most part. But
it is.
You've got an important message.
It is time for the TWiT annual audience survey, and we want to hear from you folks. It only takes just a couple minutes, about 5 minutes or so. So head on over in your browser to twit.to/survey20 and let us know what you think. There's no sign-up form, and we're not going to track you. Just allows you to give us a little bit of feedback to make TWiT even better. And we really do appreciate you all filling this thing out and giving us your continued support.
John, I appreciate watching you fill out this form and not know the answer to any of these questions and hit 2 or 3 things for each question. It's like, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I have a cat. No, I don't have a cat, I have a dog. No, I don't have a dog, I have a bird. I have another, actually.
I have an other.
Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats. You can find all of our episodes there, and you should do so.
Yep. And you can be a part of the show by emailing us at tnw@twit.tv and follow us on the social medias with @twit. And if you want to tweet me, go ahead and just tweet me with @_Pruitt.
And I'm @Jason Howell on Twitter. Thanks to everyone who helps us do the show. John, Jeff, and so many other folks. Burke was in here. I think he just walked past the door. So
no, I thought I saw him climbing up the rafters a minute ago.
Oh, don't following us, Burke. I wouldn't be surprised. And thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
All right. Bye.